Hailing from a quaint town just beyond the bustling city of Chicago, I'd always held my family as my foundation. Communication was key in our household, and we never shied away from expressing ourselves. My brother Chris and I shared a special bond, a blend of camaraderie and healthy competition. He, the charismatic, carefree spirit, and I, the meticulous, strategic thinker. Our younger sister, Jane, basked in the limelight as the baby of the family, under the loving gaze of our parents, Susan and Brian, embodying the quintessential Midwestern charm. Mom ruled the household with strict authority, while Dad played the role of a carefree joker who found joy in grilling steaks as if it were his ultimate purpose in life. I believed I had everything under control: a stable family life, reliable siblings, and a fiancée whom I thought was my perfect match. Linda entered my life during a group project in my junior year at UChicago. She possessed a captivating energy that attracted everyone to her. Driven, self-assured, and incredibly attractive. I quickly developed feelings for her, and by the end of the semester, we were a couple. Our relationship progressed rapidly, and without a doubt, I saw a future with her, envisioning careers, children, and everything in between. In a simple yet heartfelt moment one November evening, I proposed to her, and she accepted, leading us to plan our wedding for the upcoming summer. It felt like the beginning of the life I had always longed for. However, everything took a turn for the worse in March. On a leisurely Friday at work, I had decided to surprise Linda with her favorite takeout and a special evening together. As I entered our apartment, I immediately noticed something was amiss. Despite finding her shoes by the door, the place was unusually quiet, save for faint laughter emanating from the bedroom. Although I tried to dismiss my suspicions by reasoning that she might be on the phone or watching a humorous video, an ominous feeling lingered within me. When I mustered the courage to open the bedroom door, my world came crashing down. There lay Linda and Chris entangled on the bed. My heart shattered seeing Linda adorned in the oversized t-shirt I had gifted her on Valentine's Day, the one adorned with a cheesy heart print. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place swiftly. They both froze, resembling deer caught in headlights. The silence spoke volumes. My brother Chris audaciously claimed it's not what it looks like. I could only gaze at him in disbelief, on the verge of laughter at the absurdity of the situation. Linda remained silent, hastily wrapping herself in the blanket, as if trying to hide the undeniable truth. I witnessed something that I wished I could erase from my memory. However, I remained composed and did not react with anger or inquiries. The evidence was clear before me. Turning to Linda, I calmly instructed her to gather her belongings and leave. I refused to give them the satisfaction of witnessing me lose control. Despite Chris attempting to justify the situation, I abruptly ended his words, declaring that he was no longer a part of my life. I had no interest in listening to his justifications or insincere apologies. There is no excuse for betraying a sibling by engaging with their partner. I departed without seeking further explanations or accepting any feeble apologies, driving to a friend's house for the night. As I lay awake, pondering the situation, the stark reality of the betrayal struck me. Both my fiancé, the person I intended to marry, and my brother whom I had trusted implicitly, had deeply wounded me. It wasn't solely about the act of infidelity, but the deliberate choice they made to shatter something significant to me. The day after discovering Linda and Chris' betrayal, I didn't. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. While I was at work, Linda moved out of the apartment without a word. I had already asked her to pack up and leave, thinking that would be the end of it. However, when I returned home that evening, I found a note on the counter where we once displayed a framed picture of us. The note was brief but far from sweet. In it, Linda confessed that she had fallen in love with Chris and expressed regret for hurting me. She ended with a request for my forgiveness and a hope that someday I could be happy for them. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all, but there was nothing humorous about the situation. It only fueled my anger. I crumpled the note and discarded it, knowing there was nothing left to say to her. The apartment felt hollow without her belongings, but I didn't mind. All I wanted was for her to be gone from my life as quickly as possible, and now that wish had been granted. Within a few days, my family learned of the situation, though I hadn't shared the details. It seemed that Linda or Chris had spilled the beans. My mom, Susan, called me immediately. She was furious, not at me, but at Chris. She kept saying how she couldn't believe her own son would betray me like that. "He's not welcome here," she repeated. At first, it felt good to have her on my side, but I wasn't naive enough to think it would last. My mom's loyalty had always been conditional. She prided herself on keeping the family together, even if it meant sweeping huge betrayals under the rug. I figured it was only a matter of time before she started defending Chris. My dad, Brian, was different. When I finally answered one of his calls, he didn't say much, just sighed and said, "Well, I guess things like this happen sometimes." I couldn't believe it. He wasn't angry, upset, or even surprised. He treated it like Chris had spilled coffee on my shirt, not like he had destroyed my relationship and shattered my trust in him. Jane, my younger sister, tried to be supportive, but I could tell she was torn. She called to check on me and she couldn't believe what Chris and Linda had done, but I could hear the hesitation in her voice. She was caught between me and the rest of the family, and it was obvious for weeks. I ignored most of their calls. I didn't have the energy to rehash what happened or hear excuses about why I should let it go. Instead, I threw myself into work. It was the only thing that kept me grounded. My boss, Kevin, noticed I was putting in extra hours and asked if everything was okay. I didn't tell him the full story, but I admitted I was dealing with some personal stuff. That's when he mentioned the Pittsburgh office. Apparently, they'd been struggling to find someone to lead the team there, and Kevin thought I'd be a perfect fit. It was a promotion and a chance to get away from Chicago, far away from Linda and all the mess they had created. I didn't hesitate. I told him I was interested. When I informed my parents about the move, my dad simply said, "Good for you. A fresh start might be exactly what you need, my mom." On the other hand, she acted as though I'd announced I was relocating to the moon. She cried and begged me to reconsider. "What about family dinners? What about Christmas? You can't just leave us behind, Logan," she pleaded. I told her I wasn't leaving them behind. I was leaving Chris behind. "He's not part of this family anymore," I said firmly. But I didn't believe her. My mom has a knack for saying one thing and doing the exact opposite when it suits her. By July, my gut feeling was confirmed. Chris was back in the house. My mom called one evening, casually dropping that they had decided to let him come home for a while because he had nowhere else to go. She acted like it was no big deal, as if she wasn't inviting the person who had betrayed me into her home while still expecting me to show up for Sunday dinners. I didn't even try to hide my anger. I told her it felt like a slap in the face that she was choosing him over me. She tried to justify it, saying he's still my son and I refused to turn him away. I declared firmly, "He is no longer my brother, and I want nothing to do with him." That's when she initiated her family unity campaign, advocating for us to come together and move forward as a family. To me, it seemed like a way to absolve herself of guilt for welcoming Chris back. I made it clear that I wasn't interested in pretending everything was okay, or in the concept of family unity. If we want unity, then we shouldn't be rewarding the person who caused all this chaos, I asserted before ending the call. After that, I distanced myself from the situation. I focused on preparing for my move to Detroit. I secured a new place, packed up my belongings, and embraced a fresh start in a city where my family history was unknown. Leaving Milwaukee was emotional. I cherished the good memories there, but being constantly reminded of what I had lost made staying unbearable. Though departing felt like a defeat to Chris and Linda, in reality, staying would have been a greater loss. Starting over is the most effective way to move forward. By the time I had decided to leave, I had mostly severed connections with my family. Ignoring their calls and messages had become routine, and even Jane's attempts to remain neutral no longer influenced me. Their decision to welcome Chris back had led me to make my own choice, to leave them behind. Unsure of what the future held, one thing was certain: I was no longer willing to be the dutiful son who always prioritized family. Henceforth, I would prioritize my own needs. It was time to reconstruct my life on my own terms. By September, I had acclimated to my new surroundings in Detroit. Although it had been a challenging decision, cutting ties with my family proved to be the best choice I had made. Work was progressing smoothly. I had begun forming new friendships, and the distance from the previous turmoil was exactly what I required. Then I received a call from my mother, Susan. She wanted me to return home to celebrate her upcoming birthday. Despite the strained relationship we had due to her decision to welcome Chris back into their lives, I hesitated. Despite my reservations, I agreed to visit my parents after my mother insisted it would only be immediate family and that she missed me. The drive to their house felt endless, allowing doubts to creep in about my decision. Although my mom had let me down in the past, I convinced myself that this visit was for her benefit. Perhaps it wouldn't be so unbearable if it was just her, my dad, and my sister Jane. However, upon arriving at the house, I immediately sensed that something was amiss. There were too many cars parked outside, and seeing my ex Chris's car in the driveway made my stomach sink. Despite the urge to turn back, I resisted, not wanting to give my mom the satisfaction of me backing out. I resolved to make a brief appearance and leave as soon as possible. Upon entering, my mom greeted me cheerfully, as if nothing was wrong. She welcomed me with a hug and expressed how glad she was that I had come, her exuberance feeling forced. As if she was attempting to gloss over any underlying tension. She scanned the living room and was taken aback to see Chris and Linda casually lounging on the couch as if nothing was wrong. Linda even had the audacity to chuckle at something Jane had said. I stood there in shock, questioning why they were present. In a hushed voice, I demanded, "Why are they here?" Before my mom could respond, she clasped my arm and guided me further into the house. As we entered the living room, my mom embarked on her usual dialogue about familial reconciliation. She sat me down and embarked on a monologue about how Chris and Linda regretted their misstep and were genuinely apologetic. It was time, she urged, to move forward as a united family. Chris, shamelessly nonchalant, added, "I'm sorry, buddy, it just happened," as though it were a minor inconvenience rather than a life-altering betrayal. Linda half-heartedly echoed, "We never intended to cause harm," though her lack of remorse was evident. I stared at them, struggling to comprehend how they could rationalize their actions. It was almost comical that they believed the situation could be resolved. Leading forward, I met Chris's gaze and delivered a cutting blow, telling him he was a disgrace of a brother. Turning to Linda, I wished upon her the same betrayal and pain she had caused me. The room fell into an eerie silence. My mother attempted to interject, but I silenced her with a final declaration before leaving, expressing my disdain for their actions and cutting ties with the family. Ignoring my mother's feeble attempts to calm the situation, I left without looking back, my mind consumed with confusion and hurt. How could my mother condone such deception and expect me to move on as if nothing had happened? Throughout the day, I struggled to shake off my frustration, which lingered despite my attempts to let it go. The replay of the encounter kept looping in my mind, leaving me yearning to have expressed myself more articulately. Although a part of me longed to confide in my mother and release all my pent-up emotions, deep down, I understood it would be futile. Her decision to reconcile with Chris and Linda had already been made. That evening, I made the decision to block both my mother's and Chris's numbers, the latter of whom had not made any effort to contact me in months. I anticipated that eventually, one of them would attempt to mend the rift again, but I was determined not to engage with the situation. In the following weeks, I withdrew into myself. Immersing myself in work became my refuge, throwing myself into every task that came my way. Perhaps my colleagues interpreted my intense focus as dedication, but in reality, it served as a way to channel my growing exasperation. I'd also refrain from logging onto social media, as viewing family photos would only serve as a painful reminder of recent events and the negativity associated with them. Although I convinced myself that I was better off without their presence, the lingering sadness persisted, highlighting the void left by the people whom I had once held dear. After being let down by those I trusted most, particularly in the South, I began to slowly heal and rebuild my life. I convinced myself that I could create my own supportive circle with people who truly cared for me and didn't need those who had disappointed me. However, deep down, I knew the turmoil was not completely over. My resilient mom was likely to find a way to pull me back into the drama. Despite this, I was content to maintain my distance and focus on my own well-being. I preferred solitude over being with individuals who did not appreciate me. If they chose to ignore the wrongs committed by Chris and Linda, that was their prerogative. I was determined not to be a part of their denial. Although uncertain about the future, one thing was clear: I had taken charge of my life. By January, life in Pittsburgh was everything I had hoped for. A welcome escape from the chaos of my family one. Despite having only crossed paths a few times at family gatherings and hardly exchanging more than a handful of words, when she unexpectedly reached out to me about relocating to Pittsburgh and seeking assistance, I initially harbored doubts. 2. Contemplating whether to disregard her message entirely, past experiences with my family had consistently underscored the perils of getting entangled with them in any capacity. 3. However, a sense of empathy crept in. Sarah had not wronged me personally, and it was conceivable that she was unaware of the complete backstory. 4. Moreover, her genuine apprehension about navigating a new city solo tugged at my conscience, prompting me, albeit reluctantly, to acquiesce to her request for help. 5. When the weekend arrived, I arrived at the location she had provided, a modest apartment complex situated in a tranquil neighborhood. 6. Maneuvering into the parking lot, the rest of the scene unfolded before me. Everything appeared ordinary until the moment I spotted the U-Haul truck and saw Chris and my dad unloading boxes, instant recognition hitting me. I felt my hands tighten on the steering wheel, turning pale as I considered fleeing the parking lot without a backward glance. However, before I could make a move, the door of the apartment swung open, revealing my mom, who immediately waved enthusiastically as if our unexpected encounter was a joyous family reunion rather than an unsettling surprise. "Logan, wait," she called out, hurrying toward my car. I shifted the car into park, but remained in my seat, hesitant to draw it any closer. "What's going on?" I questioned, nodding towards Chris and my dad, who appeared uncomfortable standing by the truck. My mom gave me a tired yet placating expression, launching into her well-rehearsed speech about Sarah needing assistance and the family coming together. It was apparent that this situation had little to do with Sarah. It was a ploy to lure me back into their fraught cycle of reconciliation. Chris, always adept at insincere apologies, has stood before me, tears beginning to pool in his eyes. "Logan, I'm sorry," he choked out, his voice quivering as if he was auditioning for a role. "I know I made a mistake. I just want to make things right." I gazed at him, unmoved by his words that echoed the same feeble attempt he had made at my mom's birthday celebration. Then my dad chimed in. "Logan, come on," he interjected, his tone laced with condescension, a familiar approach he used whenever he thought I was being unreasonable. "You're carrying this grudge, and it's causing rifts in the family. Show some maturity." That was the breaking point. Hearing him downplay Chris's betrayal as a minor error that I should simply forgive pushed me over the edge. He couldn't comprehend the pain of being betrayed by your own brother, of losing not just a relationship, but the trust you once held in your loved ones. In a swift moment of emotion, when my dad reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder, instinct took over, and my fist collided with his face before I could even process my actions. The sharp sounds of impact rang out, and for a moment, everything went still. My dad stumbled back, holding his jaw, eyes wide in shock. Chris looked like he wanted to sink into the ground, and my mom, predictably, burst into tears. "Logan," she sobbed, as if I were the one ruining everything. Chris muttered something under his breath about me going too far, but I didn't even bother responding. I turned and walked away, my footsteps heavy as I headed back to my car. "Don't follow me," I called over my shoulder. When I got home, I blocked Sarah's number without hesitation. I didn't care if she was part of the scheme or just an innocent pawn. Either way, I wanted nothing to do with her. That night, I sat on the couch trying to process what had just happened. I wasn't proud of losing my temper, but I didn't regret it. My dad had crossed the line, And if it took a punch to get them to understand that I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore, then so be it. What stung the most was how unsurprising all this was. My mom's willingness to forgive Chris, regardless of the harm he caused, contrasted with my dad's preference for maintaining peace over addressing the root issues. I couldn't help but wonder how long they had been planning this. Had they been coaching Sarah for weeks to reach out to me, or was it a spontaneous decision? Regardless, I had made the choice to walk away before they could entangle me once more. The following morning, I awoke with a conflicting sense of relief and sorrow. Relief stemmed from standing by my principles, while sorrow reminded me of the depths to which my family had sunk. Recognizing the irreparable nature of the situation, with my family refusing to acknowledge Chris and Linda's betrayal, I decided to further sever ties. I refused to be drawn back into their turmoil. By December, I found myself in a much better emotional and mental state in Pittsburgh. My relationship with Kelly, a 24-year-old, had also begun to blossom, a woman who quickly became my rock. She was kind, funny, supportive, and most importantly, she respected my boundaries. She knew about the mess with my family and never once pressured me to reconnect. When she invited me to spend Christmas with her family in Bay City, I was genuinely looking forward to the holidays for the first time in years. Her parents were warm and welcoming, her siblings were great, and there was none of the drama that had always plagued my own family gatherings. A week before Christmas, I received an unexpected letter. At first, I almost disregarded it because I didn't recognize the handwriting. But when I opened it, my stomach dropped. It was from my mom. She wrote that Chris and Linda had gotten married and that my parents were now separated. She didn't give many details but kept emphasizing how much the family needed me this Christmas. She begged me to come home, hoping it could be a chance to heal and move forward. I read the letter twice, trying to figure out if this truly pertained to me, or was merely another attempt to resolve the mess caused by Chris. The mention of their marriage left me feeling queasy. It felt like a harsh wake-up call, a prompt that they had moved forward without a hint of regret. Upon showing the letter to Kelly, she advised me to release the burden. "You don't owe them anything," she said tenderly. "If it's only going to harm you, there's no reason to subject yourself to that." She was correct. Yet a small part of me still wrestled with guilt, not for cutting ties, but for the ingrained sense of duty my mom instilled in me. Ultimately, I opted to spend Christmas with Kelly's family. They resided in a charming home in the suburbs of Bay City, and the moment we stepped in, I knew I had made the right decision. Her parents welcomed me with open arms, and her mother wasted no time in asking if I preferred hot chocolate or mulled cider. It was pure and heartwarming, a departure from anything I had encountered in years. The holiday season was different that year. Filled with cookies and board games, the kind of peaceful celebration I had always longed for but never experienced. Christmas morning was serene, without the usual tension that always loomed in the background. Kelly's family had a heartwarming tradition of opening presents in cozy pajamas, and they had even prepared a stocking with my name on it. A simple gesture that made me feel truly welcomed and accepted. Despite the warmth surrounding me, thoughts of my own family persisted in the recesses of my mind. I couldn't help but wonder how they were spending the holidays, if my mother was alone at home, if my father was celebrating at all, or if my siblings were pretending that everything was fine. I pushed these thoughts aside, determined to focus on the joy and sense of belonging that Kelly's family had offered me. As I settled back into my routine in January, a surprise email from Jane disrupted my peace. It had been months since I last heard from her, so I hesitated before opening it. In the email, Jane revealed that my father was now living in a motel. Chris and Linda were facing financial difficulties. Linda indicated that Chris's job was uncertain, and she was unhappy in their marriage without providing specifics. I pondered Jane's purpose in sharing this with me. Was she seeking empathy or expecting me to intervene? Nevertheless, I chose not to respond to the email. I struggled to find the right words. Conveying sympathy felt insincere, yet dismissing their troubles seemed callous. I resolved not to entangle myself in their problems. Chris and Linda had made their choices, and now had to confront the repercussions. Despite my reluctance to revel in their misfortunes, a sense of justice pervaded my thoughts. Their past actions, which had upended my life, were now manifesting consequences. As Kelly perceived my subdued demeanor that evening and inquired about it, I paused, uncertain about delving into the complexities of the situation. Everything was fine. When I informed her about the email, she simply nodded, her expression gentle yet resolute. "You've already put in the hard work to move forward," she remarked. "Don't allow them to draw you back in." Her words resonated with me. I had dedicated considerable effort to rebuilding my life, and I was not going to let their issues unsettle me now. Whatever was unfolding within my family was no longer my burden to bear. The following day, I deleted Jane's email and blocked her contact. Although it was a difficult decision, it was a necessary one. I'd refused to allow them to manipulate me back into their lives through guilt or sympathy. Spending the Christmas with Kelly's family felt like a pivotal moment. It marked the first time I truly comprehended what it meant to be liberated from the toxic environment I had grown up in. I no longer craved approval or validation from my family. Instead, I had discovered individuals who appreciated me for who I am, not for what I could offer them. The tumult of my past no longer shaped my identity. I had constructed a new life, and I had no intention of glancing backward. By June, I was content with the progress I had made. My bond with Kelly was strengthening daily, causing my connection to my family to fade into the background. I had severed all ties with them, dismissing their feeble attempts to reconcile and concentrating solely on my own well-being. However, they were not ready to give up. One Saturday morning, as I was getting ready for a run, I heard a knock on my door. I was not anticipating any visitors, and when I glanced through the peephole, I was stunned. It was Jane. I had not laid eyes on her in more than a year, and for a moment, I contemplated pretending not to be home. Nonetheless, I decided to open the door, and upon seeing me, she broke down in tears. "Logan, I'm so sorry," she cried, stepping into the hallway before I could even ask her in. "I should have supported you more. I should have taken a stand." Her apology caught me off guard. Jane had been a passive presence in my life for so long, someone who never directly harmed me, but who also never defended me. To hear her acknowledge her failings was unexpected. Responsibility caught me off guard, leaving me at a loss for words. Jane confessed to cutting ties with Chris, Linda, and even Mom, explaining that she couldn't handle it any longer. As she wiped away tears, she looked at me, pleading for a chance to talk. Despite my inner turmoil urging me to walk away, I couldn't ignore the desperation in her eyes. Reluctantly, I agreed to meet with her and Dad a few days later at a quiet diner on the city's outskirts. When I arrived, Jane and Dad Brian were already seated. The last time I'd seen him was when I punched him outside Sarah's apartment, and the tension between us was palpable. Although Dad stood to greet me and offered his hand, I chose to remain seated, my arms folded as I stared back at them, waiting for an explanation. Finally, my dad broke the silence with an apology, his voice filled with, "I deeply regret not doing more to protect you and handling things differently." The situation was not as hopeful as I initially thought, as my mom, accompanied by others, entered the diner. Despite being urged to hear them out, I made it clear that they were no longer my family and that I would not be manipulated anymore. It was a difficult realization that this family was full of manipulators and untrustworthy individuals. I expressed my decision to sever ties with them, emphasizing that they were dead to me if you attempt to reach me. I will seek a restraining order. After leaving some money on the table for my coffee, I walked out without acknowledging the voices calling out to me. It was at that precise moment that I realized there was no turning back. Despite any begging, pleading, or crying, I had decided to no longer be the scapegoat for my family's dysfunction. At 28, I now feel as though I have experienced multiple lifetimes since the chaos within my family unfolded. Reflecting on it all, it almost seems surreal, like it happened to someone else. However, the scars serve as a constant reminder that it was, indeed, all too real. The positive outcome is that I have emerged stronger, wiser, and surrounded by individuals who genuinely care for me. Last year, Kelly and I became engaged in a simple manner at our favorite park in Pittsburgh. I opted not to go for a grand gesture because I had come to understand that true love does not require one. When I proposed, Kelly cried and immediately accepted. That moment felt like the missing piece of the puzzle I had been trying to solve. When everything crumbled, she became more than just my fiancée. She became my true partner in every sense. Through all the challenges and triumphs, she stood by me without judgment, never pressuring me to reconnect with the family I had left behind. With her, I found a sense of security I never thought possible. The most exciting news? We're expecting our first child, a boy. The thought of holding him for the first time fills me with a mix of nervous anticipation and joy. Despite my past, I never imagined feeling prepared for fatherhood. However, Kelly's unwavering faith in us fills me with optimism. I am determined to provide our son with a life filled with love, respect, and stability. The kind of upbringing I never had. One significant step I took in breaking free from my past was changing my last name. I didn't make this decision lightly. I initially hesitated, wondering if it was too drastic or if it would truly make a difference. But as time flowed by, I came to the realization that my surname was a weight tying me to a difficult past. And I made the decision to release it. It felt surreal to be in the courthouse, completing the necessary forms. When the judge approved the change, a sense of relief washed over me, as if I had finally shut a door I had long avoided closing. Opting for a new last name that held personal significance rather than familial ties, I felt a connection to a revered figure. Kelly stood by me in full support of this choice. Light-heartedly mentioning that she might adopt my new surname after our marriage, she remarked, "We are forging our own legacy now," a sentiment that resonated deeply with me. The concept of crafting something fresh, distinct from the pain and discord of the past, became my primary focus. Since severing ties with my family, I sporadically learned snippets about their lives not by actively seeking, but through inadvertent mentions by common acquaintances. It seems my parents have now officially parted ways, with my father residing in a modest rental on the outskirts parts of the town are abuzz with gossip about my family situation. My mother remains in the family home, diligently upholding appearances. In contrast, Chris and Linda are facing a string of misfortunes. Struggling under a mountain of debt, their marriage is reportedly on shaky ground. Linda's job loss and Chris's uncertain work status have added to their woes. It's ironic how the tables have turned. Despite their efforts to undermine me in the past, they are now the ones grappling to stay afloat. Jane's situation is no better. Her fiancé called off their wedding just months before the big day. I have little interest in the specifics, as her decision to side with Chris and Linda in the past still weighs heavily on my mind. The last direct contact I had with any of them was through my mother's pleading letter over a year ago, which I promptly discarded unopened. The burden of any remorse they may feel now rests solely on their shoulders. This experience has taught me the vital lesson of prioritizing self-care and boundaries. Establishing boundaries has been a challenging process. For a long time, I allowed my family to manipulate me into forgiving them and carrying the weight of their problems. Deciding to disengage from them was a difficult but necessary step towards my personal growth. I sometimes reflect on whether my family regrets their actions or comprehends the extent of their actions. Nonetheless, their potential remorse is no longer my concern. What truly matters now is that I have found peace. Walking away from toxic relationships, particularly ones within your own family, can be a daunting task. Yet, it can be the vital step in safeguarding your well-being and building the life you deserve. Your worth is not determined by blood relations. Family transcends genetics. It comprises those who stand by your side, offer unwavering support, and love you wholeheartedly. With Kelly as my steadfast companion and our upcoming addition, I am grateful to have formed the family I have always longed for. Listeners, we welcome your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to engage by liking, sharing, and subscribing.